You can get silence easily this way, you watch. It's a little slow. Just demonstrating a way that people will come to quiet. Did you notice? That's because it was done so quietly, you didn't notice. Okay, but it's simply enough sometimes to stand up and become very still and relaxed. And then you sort of look at people who are still talking or give them a nod or a smile, and the whole room will come to quiet without having to say anything at all. Okay, well, how was afternoon tea? It was all right? Oh, good. It's all right. We'll just tell the kitchen. This afternoon we're going to talk about the PDC. And the first thing we're going to talk about the PDC is how was yours taught? So who learnt from Bill? Oh, would you like, it's not Nick, it's Wayne. Would you like to tell us how Bill taught, please, Wayne? It was quite distinctive.
Yeah, it was mentioned earlier that his style was very much lecturing. He put his head down or looked at the board and delivered a monologue day after day after day. Very engaging monologue. It was fascinating, but between times he was, even I found a difficult person to have a conversation with because he was on a mission to deliver stuff. So yeah, quite the antithesis of the sort of styles that we've been discussing.
Well, it's very difficult to be an entertaining speaker for 72 hours, 12 days. It's really hard. And Bill was engaging in the use of language, in his intonation, and look, not only that, he said outrageous things. And he upset people. So we were in Vietnam together, and he told the Vietnamese that they'd run out of water and be drinking it in plastic bottles in 5 years. They were furious, because the one thing they felt they had was lots of water. In 5 years, they were drinking it out of plastic bottles. And he was often acerbic and quite rough, but he was one of the few people who could sit there, often with a beer and a cigarette, and talk for 72 hours and deliver the PDC. Just before that, it's really important that we as teachers all know our history. We were in Bangladesh, and the head of a local NGO there, Permaculture NGO, said, permaculture was started by Sepp Holzer. Do you know Sepp Holzer? Yeah, Austrian farmer, lives in the Alps, uses lots and lots of lakes from melting snows to modify the climate and grow citrus and things. Is not a designer and never done a course. And I said, who told you? And he said, we had Russians here who said Sepp Holzer. So to be honest and accurate, we have to know our history. So it was Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, and for us, a lucky, lucky marriage of minds, because Bill had a big view and David was able to fill in the details. So Bill would have the roof on and David had come in and be putting all the detail together. It was one of those wonderful partnerships that worked very, very well in developing what we call permaculture, and very, very important, I think. That was the early 70s, and there was a confluence at that time. There were a number of things happening. Do you remember other things? Anyone know what was happening in those?
What's the Report of Rome, that one? The Limits to Growth? That was in the 70s.
That's right, Limits to Growth. The Club of Rome came together and started saying, we are in trouble. We can't go on like this. The amount of fossil fuels is too great, and we're burning up resources faster than we could use them.
OPEC oil crisis?
Mm-hmm.
The OPEC oil crisis?
And then we hit the oil crisis where we were going to run out of oil, and everyone was talking about that and what it would mean for the world to run out of energy. Somewhere along that line was Silent Spring, who was in that world. So at that time, bells started to be rung and pulled something's a bit wrong. And the response to that was permaculture, which was seen as a permanent culture, not permanent agriculture particularly, except once you think globally, various types of agriculture give forms to culture. So you could talk about the bamboo culture, or you could talk about the mud culture of mud huts, mud villages, mud bricks, and the whole thing there. The growing of food develops its own culture as well. So some are a culture around buffalo, some around dairy cows, some around pigs. You know, you have culture developing in those ways, and cattle in Africa. So when you start to think about it, you can see how permanent cultures evolved and very closely related to the environment and food. And really important to recognise because so much has been done in transforming a wrong culture. The first people, that MacArthur who brought sheep and wheat to Australia, did an enormous disservice. We would have been far better with the Spaniards. They would have brought grapes, figs, olives, but then they would have brought goats. We have to think whether we would have been better with the Chinese, with pigs and rice field. You know, just thinking of our historical accident. And when people bring the wrong culture, then they have to transform the environment to make it fit. So we either have to have lots and lots of irrigation, or we have to have lots of ryegrass and clover. We have to start twisting the environment, natural environment, to fit that particular thing. Dairy cows, deep green grass. So Bill and David looked at this very closely and then came up with permaculture. I would have left permaculture years ago, except it never ceases to astound me how very, very forward-thinking and perceptive some of those early principles were. If you think now that they were saying, bring food production back to the cities. Now, faced with climate change and global warming, faced with epidemics and pandemics and plagues, faced with a huge world population, 70% in cities, what are the cities going to do? So there were things in there that just seemed prescient. Absolutely amazing. How could someone come up with that from the 70s? And I think you know then that Bill went on radio in Victoria. He gave a talk in the afternoon. I think 35,000 people rang in and said, tell us more about permaculture. And Bill went on the road and David stayed home and practiced it. So you had then a little bit of a split. There was a split between them. And Bill was pretty irascible and quite rude and quite difficult. But he did have this marvellous mind, and in the last few years I have missed him terribly because we've hit wicked problems in permaculture that we need some of the best minds and experienced people thinking about to see how it can be applied to this new range of unforeseeable situations. Or they're only foreseeable because the rate of acceleration of global warming. So we really need to be, in this group in particular, where you have some skills and knowledge, need to be applying our minds to that. So this session is a little bit about the PDC, and we'd start first with how it's taught. Now, after Bill stood and talked, then David stood and talked, and then Jeff stood and talked, and then Darren Doherty stood and talked. And some of us went to sleep and woke up, and went to sleep and woke up, and the talkers were still talking. But on the whole, they were losing us, I think, as an audience in some ways. It was still exciting, adventurous, but when we look at the care of people, there was none of that. And so if we want to be consistent and have integrity, we really need to move to a type of teaching where care of people is practiced together with care of the earth. So I'd like to know, unless you embarrass your teachers, how your courses were taught. What's been the evolution of the teaching of the PDC before we talk about content? You could probably be thrown out if your teacher's in the room, but they might have a...
To be clear, when you said Jeff, you didn't mean this Jeff, you meant another Jeff.
Yeah, I meant another Jeff.
Equally appropriate.
So that was the first model, and things have changed a lot since then, and they've changed naturally and they've changed deliberately. So just talk to the person next to you for a minute about how you were taught, unless you're in the same course, in which case turn to someone else. Just what were the teaching methods? So all those happy memories, those wonderful days, I think every now and again someone comes along who can change a society or a people, and there are not many, and I would really think that Bill is one of those, and he's never been so needed as he is at the moment. But those people are not always easy to get on with, and I think that's one of the things that we just live with.
They're usually spiky pioneer plants.
Yeah, spiky plant. And pioneers, yes. Yeah. And so, the work that Bill did in India and in Africa continues to stay. Some of the best farms in India near Hyderabad were started 35 years ago and are sensationally good. We in dry country Australia could learn so much from those older models of well-established and designed farms feeding big numbers of people in their environments and old places. So we need to get that. And some of the United States stuff, some of the African is still going strongly. So it's been a great legacy. What happened with permaculture is that each one taught one went out to teach more, and that's part of a tradition that we'll talk about tomorrow. But right now we'd like to look a little bit, that was process, but we want to look a little bit at the content. So I wonder if someone would like to drop down that poster, please. And perhaps while you're there, we'll just have a look at what it says. It's a bit small. So the state of the PDC up to COVID was pretty much like this. Now you're all learning about your posters, aren't you? Okay. Not having a go or anything, just is so. So what's the first thing, please? What's it say? Okay, actually, yeah, it is. So we need someone with a good voice to read it, because I can't quite hear up here, I've got an infection.
Sarah, I think you're in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Tendency, permanent, resilient, adaptive.
Right, so thank you. In the beginning, if you listen to those early tapes, and there are some around, and they're still inspirational, the 72-hour Talk Fest, they talked about permanence. And it was very much, if we expect to be permanently on this earth, meaning before the sun cools in, 4.7 billion years, then we have to live within our means. That was a very early theme of permaculture, being permanently on earth and able to live reasonably well. So then that gradually changed to something called sustainability. And what was sustainability in your understanding? What would you understand sustainability to be?
I understand it as systems that are able to be sustained over time.
Yeah, good, all right. A little more?
Yes, something that can continue to be done without detriment.
Yes?
Energy maybe isn't lost in the system. It's
That's
sustainable.
rather nice. Yes, I think they're all correct.
Sustainability also would include humans sustaining our life as well as the life of the natural world around us. So it's this
Yeah, that's a pretty good definition. Yes. Anyone else? Sustainability?
I always think sustainability is a bit dated now, though, don't you?
Yeah, I think it applied a certain equilibrium, didn't it? Like a balance sheet. You took a bit and more appeared, and you took a bit and more appeared, so that you stayed in a type of stasis or homeostasis. And that meant that we were never diminishing what we had.
But we weren't adding ever either.
So that became a lie a few years ago, didn't it?
But that was the catch cry a while ago, sustainability, and now regenerative seems to be
next one up.
That's right. So in the meantime, we also started to realise that global warming was accelerating, and we started talking about being very resilient. So sustainability tended to drop out. So I think we're now using the resources in 8 months that should last for 2.5 years. It's something like that. People talk about 2.5 worlds. So we're eating into the future's capital at a great rate. Timber, water, energy sources, minerals.
Topsoil.
Yep.
Topsoil, sorry.
Yeah, so, you know, we're chewing away at the future at an enormous rate. When I say we, it's usually the world's big consumers, more than it's actually population. But we've got to a point now, we've just hit 8 billion, I think, this week. And in this week, population becomes a factor, even if people don't have enough to eat. They're often taking the last tree or the last something. So then sustainability doesn't work very well, except if you define it as sustaining water supplies, sustaining biodiversity, sustaining forests, sustaining fisheries, in which case we can't really talk about resilience anymore, because there can be no resilience while we undermine our base. We're just eating it away, you know, like a river does the sides of the bank, and then one day it collapses. That's the position that we're living at the moment. And now we're really back to something called restoration, which appears to be the role and task of humans, because there's not another animal species which is able to restore and consciously restore the way we can. So that sense of urgency is with people who understand what that loss of resource means for all of us and for the future. So we bring in here a couple of new principles sometimes, the intergenerational ethic and the, what's the ethic for danger?
The precautionary principle.
Can you say it again?
Precautionary principle.
Precautionary principle. If you're going to ride downhill and you know on your bicycle and you know the brakes are a bit faulty, what do? Check your brakes. And we're in the position we're going downhill and we haven't checked our brakes. We haven't made sure that we're safe to go down that hill. So we have moved from really permanence to restoration, and that is a fairly new concept. It's an interesting concept because if you look at all the design work of permaculture, whether it's a kitchen garden or it's a harvest forest or it's preserving native indigenous forests and extending them, then what we are restorers of soil, restorers of water, cleaners of water. We are preservers of biodiversity, whether it's heirloom seed or wild species, and that gives us a very special role. And that seems to be where we are today. And permaculture suffered quite a lot from not having a clear definition of the role of humans. If I said, well, you're a brain surgeon, we'd have a pretty clear idea, give her a knife and a hammer, and what she'd do, right? If we said you're a plumber, we'd have a pretty clear idea on what would happen to the block pipes. We say permaculture, define it, everyone says it's a system for sustainable living. If we were able to redefine ourselves as restorers of cultivated and natural ecosystems, then we're well on the way of having a comprehensible role that the rest of the world can understand. So can we just have some responses to that? It doesn't have to be restored as is, but we have to restore water, biodiversity, soils, forests, in whatever ways we can. We cannot go back exactly because the situation has changed. The soil is no longer the soil it was. The river maybe doesn't have its course, but we absolutely have to restore those major ecosystem themes. Some thinking about that, anyone?
The people care element fits into that, as in restoring, you know, human ecologies and social interactions, you know, or cultural divides.
I still think that restore sort of means that there's like a baseline where we're returning to, but I like regenerative better because it means that we're adding to it so that for the future we're giving back more than we're taking. So whereas restore is take it back to a place where it's it's functioning properly again. But regenerative is take it back to that place, but then go further so that we're adding to our future care.
I guess the aspect that we need to restore a conscious understanding that humans are a part of nature. I guess anyone's familiar with the ecology work. Just this idea that we actually have to understand collectively, and not everyone in this room gets it, but as a human species, a greater understanding that we are actually a part of nature. So we're only destroying ourselves.
Further to the restoration comment, you know, when you're saying about a baseline, where are we setting that baseline? We don't actually have the data to say this is ground zero. You know?
And I think we've also lost a lot of our biodiversity. Like, look at the week of how much we've lost. You will never restore it to a certain extent to the way it was. You introduce pests that are there now, you know, foxes and the diversity that we've lost out there. So yeah, like what period are you saying restoring it back to? Like where do you go, oh, I've hit the bench, like we've done the job of restoring such a degraded landscape.
So yeah, another reason to move away from business as usual in terms of like sort of outcome extract purposes, because it's an open-ended engagement. Like, it's something that needs to be continually like engaged with in the generational sense. And like further to what you were saying, there's been like a cultural, very deeply embedded like belief that we are apart from nature, that we are like in a good, like in the best sense possible, we are like some sort of higher being, in the worst sense possible, like some sort of pre-Lapsarian descended, like, you know, like sinful creature. And like neither is true. Like we simply are animals getting busy spoiling the nest. You know what I mean? Like so we need to like return to the awareness that ecology, like almost like some sort of like law of physics, like operates on us as it does everything on its own.
There's a Tyson Young, what was the quote, that we become or resume our role as the custodial species. So we do seem to have a different role and reoccupying our ecological niche. How do you define that one? I find really challenging.
You feel an ecological niche, yeah.
Those two concepts.
The question came up at lunch about how to respond to the new precedents being set, as in, you know, if we're restoring something, are we restoring it back to what was, or are we just restoring it to a point of functionality? Like, you know, is any biodiversity good biodiversity, or is it only a certain type of native biodiversity? You know, there's all these arguments that kind of clash with the traditional conservationist mentality, which, you know, some people may or may not agree with, which is, you know, a big question as well.
The intergenerational component is really interesting as well, because the concept of shifting baselines, as well as working with the kids, because they're going to have to do the heavy lifting on this, going back to older generations and historic records, because the kids that I work with can't imagine a world without plastic. When I tell them that when I was a kid, there wasn't any plastic, and we had maybe a lunchbox or something, but nothing in the supermarket was wrapped in plastic. Very difficult for them to imagine without hearing those stories. So that what we're seeing now is these old ecologies. It's really important to give people a glimpse of what they were like even a couple of generations ago.
Yeah, so these are some pretty big questions. What are we restoring? We're actually looking at a systems approach. So that was the big thing about permaculture. It brought in systems. Until then, we'd had reductive science, you know, each geology and geography and botany, and each was separate and independent. And it was really only when ecology came on board to see whole systems working together. So you had the ecological system of plants and animals together with the natural environment working as a whole. And how do we teach systems, which is what we want to do, which became really important. There's another important concept in permaculture for us, which is function. And function is a way we really must think. And function is the function of a forest, the function of a river, the function of a desert. All these have functions, and when they're all functioning well, the whole world, as you know, is Gaia, working in homeostasis to maintain life on Earth. When a system goes out, we've got some guidelines. David Suzuki and Mollison both came up with a figure of somewhere between 35 and 40% of the world is under perennial vegetation, not annuals. Then we require a stability that will help maintain climate balance and modify climate. Now that means that every day of the year perennial plants are functioning in such a way as to keep that balance. We know that if rivers are kept running well and operating well and allowed to move over and flood and then come back, and if oceans are allowed to move in and move back, then they perform special functions. So we need to understand the function of some of these special geographical ecosystems to restore them. The question of whether they should be local species, well, you know, many countries do not have indigenous vegetation. None, or very, very little. In Austria, it's only up the high Alps where they have nothing taller than your ankle, little flowers that get covered in snow. Queen Elizabeth or Princess or someone sold the whole forests of Austria at the gaming tables in Berlin, you know, in 1910 or something, just sold the lot. So everything you see back there is an introduced system that works as forests. We couldn't find the original forests with their layers and structures that we teach, the structures and layers of forests, in Portugal at all. We know someone who knows a tiny patch, remnant vegetation. We can't talk about Zone 5 to some other cultures and places. Iraq, not the slightest possibility. Afghanistan, nearest forest was 80 kilometres away, and it was probably pines, and anyway, the road was landmined. And we're talking to people about forests as our model in a situation where they've never seen such a thing. And we're asking them to relate to nature where nature is minimised in the environment. And what we need to do is restore some of the functions. The implication of this is that we start cleaning water, is that we start making sure all our sites have a certain minimum perennial cover. In everything we design, we make sure that some water goes back into the groundwater, into the bores, into the aquifers, and that every design you say to your students, where are you replenishing soil water? Where are you putting it back for the next drought? So that becomes some of our criteria for the PDC design work. And all permaculturists are able to understand where they're going with their design work when this happens. Similarly, things like windbreaks are being changed for forests because the winds are so strong. South Australia last night, 2,000 people homeless. These are our ecological, internally displaced people from winds. People are standing on the roofs of their houses at the moment being wrecked in Molonglo or somewhere in New South Wales, being taken off by helicopter. We have got our ecological refugees happening right now. It's only by trying to restore the functions of the ecosystems as a whole, particularly the big ones. So the coasts require their littoral vegetation put back in really dense vegetation. It doesn't matter whether it's casuarina or bamboo or, you know, mangroves, it needs to go back and fast. Our hills need to be revegetated from the top to manage water and soil all the way down. There are things we're looking for in students' design which I think are not negotiable and which we need to teach in such a way that anyone doing permaculture can put that into their design and be effective on a micro and a macro level. And that thing about always do more. Let's be generous. Nature will work with us if we're generous. If we need to replace the trees we've used, add an extra 20%. If you can, plant a forest. If you can, clean more water than the water you used. You know, take on your neighbours. Store more water than the water you use. We really must start banking seriously organic matter, humus, water, vegetation in ways that are really there for others and to try to stabilise what is coming very fast. So that means we're required, I think, in some ways to make changes with the PDC. Restoration or regeneration, I don't mind. David Holmgren says plant anything. so long as it functions correctly in that space. But if you're going to plant a forest, you need to know your structure and function of forests and your minimum critical mass to be effective, to understand what your students are doing. So these are some of the things I think are facing us now, and we are probably the only people who have a grasp on so many topics to do restoration.
I think also Western Australia by its nature is very extractive. We've got a very extractive culture. So I hear what you're saying about adding to it, but we also need to stop extracting. It's like by the time we're adding to it, if we've taken a step back and stopped the extraction.
Most permaculturists are activists in some way.
Yeah.
Most of us would have signed petition, carried a sign, not with Woodside, we don't want a Darnie. You know, we do at least carry those values that this extraction is so destructive in some way. And you probably choose where you want to go. That we is a difficult one. I engage myself at the level of trying to put in submissions and trying to be effective in that area. And the best place to work is your local government, as strongly as you can, because you can be heard, you can change policy. But let's keep on with the PDC a little bit. What's the next bit say?
Individual to community.
Yeah, so when the first PDCs were held, they were all about bring a little plan of your house and garden or the 5 acres you want, and you'll go home with the design. Now we're saying that's not good enough. That's come out of a Western colonial culture. We need a far more communal culture that says, when you do your design, what's going to be the impact on your neighbourhood and your street? It's not enough to secure ourselves in a siege mentality. We need to be really aware of the communal impacts we can have with our design. So it's not only your sector analysis of what comes in, it's also what's going out from you and how you act. Remember, I think it was Bill said, it's not status that matters to humans, it's how we function. And one question for all of us is, how am I functioning in my community? And I think we have to go from me to we. I can't say this to Vietnamese, and I can't say it to Chinese, and I can't say it to Afghans, but I can say it to us because we're a highly individual culture about me and my and everything, and we really have to shift that mindset quite strongly. At least coming from permaculture, we want it now to come out as we and our impact. So what is our impact on our areas or the people we talk to and work with? This becomes a big issue because things that happen by Western European cultures are so often copied and modelled by others. And it's extremely disastrous modelling to model me and my success and my achievements and my acquisitions. So somehow we have to reverse that. What's another one?
Reinforce concepts.
Reinforce which?
Concepts.
I'm sorry I'm asking, but I've had a bad ear infection the last few weeks, and I've got an appointment when I get back, but I couldn't get it in the 24 hours I was home. Reinforce concepts. Right, so we all love a technique. We love to get out after the course and make compost. What we must work with is the concept of, that's a new word, you can have it, the concept of feed the soil. And when you've fed the soil again, and feed the soil again. Soil is a vast bank and a digester for nutrient, for water, for microorganisms. It's a world on its own that isn't well enough recognised. Feed the soil. And then the question becomes how. If you're in Singapore, you're not going to make compost. You're not going to make compost in parts of Indonesia. And why? Why won't you make compost? Too wet and hot. It's gone by morning. Make this big pile of compost, go, gone. You're going to use a living mulch of some sort that gives you a product. So compost is not the beginning and the end of permaculture. It's good for a climate that has hot, wet, or hot, dry, or cold, or not hot, wet, but cold seasons. But it's not a very good product. And if you've got a big farm, who wants to make compost? It's huge, and we're trying to reduce maintenance. You do. Oh, you're the compost king, though, we know. And we better be having talks with you because there are wonderfully efficient ways of making compost now. So I wouldn't I'm not denigrating compost, it just has a place. And it's one of multitude ways of feed the soil. So looking at soil, you think, when do I feed it? How do I feed it? Feed the soil, get it back into the soil's function as banking and storing seed, water, nutrient, animals, life. And that's what we need to become aware of. So think concepts. Think clean the water, not whether you're going to have flow forms or this sort of reed bed. Think of how that can be done on a bigger scale. Think about revegetation, perhaps from helicopters, with seed balls, large scale across the tops of mountains covering tens of thousands of acres before it rains this summer in WA. Think about revegetation in ways that are significant and perhaps different in different places. So we need to start remembering the concepts and to start at the top, right? Things that we need to have in our minds to guide us that's going to make us more effective.
This is reminding me of the flying herb spiral of ignorance.
Oh, the herb spiral is so good. So in Hong Kong, where people live in 60, 80-story buildings, the herb spiral produces food for about 4 floors of people. So you have this wonderful little mountain, evergreen, herbs and everything, and people are making compost on the ground floor, and they're growing herbs on the ground floor, and then they're gradually converting parking areas to all sorts. Herb spiral absolutely has a place. 27 feet of planting gets wrapped into a snail, and there you are with one lot of water. If it's very dry, herb spiral. It is appropriate for a time and place. It's just not a symbol. And it gets carried as a symbol. On the other hand, the garden pond is really necessary everywhere. For the lizard, for the pollinators, for the moths, for the bees. Where's the water in the garden is your question. Where's the little pond for the life that's going to multiply when you put water in your garden? So we need to be thinking of these sorts of concepts all the time and working with them. Yeah. Are there other concepts? Yes. Be generous. Just give a bit more. If you have to pay a tradesman or someone, add on a couple of dollars. Just give. You know, the growth of the free economy, the gift economy is terribly important. A little bit more time, a little bit more money to someone, and the goodwill that's created multiplies right through society. I think that's another concept or meme we can use.
Manage our appetites. I think this is something before, but that's what stops us extracting too much when we eat back our appetites.
Be content.
Yeah.
So somehow thinking the concept, so what's going to happen to your mind if it isn't already becomes colonised with permaculture ideas? But these are very sound, and they're very good, and they're very creative and positive. It's just whether it's appropriate for that time and place.
Just to bring it back to sort of what we've been talking about just before in terms of the format, what would you say are the tendencies in these sorts of concepts or memes from the start to now in terms of permaculture?
What's happened to the content?
As in like broad tendencies, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, well there've been some
we've been speaking about things that used to be more prominent than they are now, and then new things that have come about as a response to...
Looking right back at permaculture, I think it's as good as it ever was. Where it goes wrong is where it starts to drift and people invent their own permaculture. So they do. There's permaculture, you know, sort of on the beach where we swim most of the day, and that's very difficult for me to understand, because permaculture deals with the great themes of life. It deals with the water, and it deals with the forests, and it deals with the ecosystems. It deals with topography. You know, it really belongs right there, and it belongs with human existence. Our care of people is about land access. It's about land tenure. It's about companies that are fair and just and equally shared, where people have a right to participate and speak. That's our care of people. And they're the things that need to be put in place so that life can thrive, so people can live well and live responsibly. Without those, we're just going to end up, I don't know, where we're going now, I think. So from the beginning, it was always taught And a good course will always teach the fundamentals of ecology and some ecology of the interrelationships and interdependence, because every time you design, you're putting an ecological system in place in some ways, and you want to know that it's sound and not going to become aberrant. So those things, the soil, the water, the climate, the microclimate. And the microclimate's a unit of design. We can't design to a climate because it's too big, but we can design to microclimate. And for that, we have to increase our observation. And then we have the rest of it being able to analyse correctly. And for that, you must understand patterns in nature. You must know what order you're in and what order would thrive there and what is required for a permanent climax ecosystem in that place, because we're generally looking at places that are destroyed or broken or been taken backwards. So, well, I'm talking about Portugal because I was there last week. There's almost isn't a tree higher than that window. And you think, wait a minute, there's something terribly wrong about that. So what you need is a different order of height of plants that's going to protect from the dust coming from the Sahara, from the hot winds, from the Atlantic coast. And that was the order which needs to be restored to, at least in height of vegetation, or thickness of windbreaks has an order. So when you look at your kitchen garden, you're in one order: ephemeral, easily broken, disappear, rake it over, put lawn back and mow it tomorrow. When you're looking at the forests you've put down, you've got that order of stability and permanence and climax which is going to work. In between that, we've got natural systems everywhere, and we need to be able to look at landscape and know what they are. And when we're designing, are we going to design in circles? Is it dry with low resource? Are we going to design in spirals because we need to conserve space or time? Are we going to design in dendritic patterns? What pattern are you going to lay on the landscape? What pattern are you interrupting if you don't get it right? So a really solid understanding of patterns. I mean, when I did it, they said, everyone go outside and bring back a leaf and talk about the edge. Well, you know, that is not helpful to a discerning eye to understand how far the breakdown's gone, whether, some cases, rivers are actually restoring themselves. Can you look at it and know what the climax river would be in that situation and how it should be and what you need to do? These are the things that we need to be looking at in permaculture and become good at. So when I talk about competence in these things. Anyone want to talk for a bit? Your chair, talk for a bit.
Sounds like a tall order.
However, this is what we are and this is what we do. This is defining us. So I think until now, the things that weren't well taught were patterns in nature. So people didn't understand how to impose a particular pattern on a landscape that was relevant for a time and place or that was restorative. I think people didn't understand the order of the landscape they were in and whether it was breaking down or could be built up and to what point. I'm having an argument with syntropic agriculture, which comes out of Brazil and requires huge quantities of water that they're using in Portugal, because I think it's out of order. Much as I think the wheat sheep thing in Australia is completely out of order, where, you know, trees and woodlands being cut down to put in an annual. So it's moved backwards to monoculture, and we need to know it needs to go forward in species and in biodiversity back to a more stable landscape. And when we know what we're doing, we then are restoring well. Agriculture, Zone 3, I think was often poorly taught, and we didn't have much to go on. So we taught Fukuoka, which was very nice, but how many people have got a rice field and going to, you know, follow his cycle? We had alley cropping, which is also very good, but what happens if you've got 10,000 acres? Can you actually do alley cropping? Possibly not. So what I did, I looked at the best of people like Sepp Holzer. Who's the guy in America? Alan Savory from Zimbabwe. Some of the others? Yeah, Alan Savory, Joel Salatin, a number of them. And what is it that they do that people do where they are farming constantly and building soil and banking water and banking nutrient while they take a product off. Because farmers always think they can only put back nutrient and they don't have a concept that they can farm in such a way that you're putting stuff back. So I looked at all those and what is it they do? Well, they all protect the area, they all make sure that there's water, they all make sure the soil is always covered, none of them plough, and all of them use rotations that build soil noticeably from year to year. And they all use a system of farming which rotates the land in some way. Then you could take those principles, if you want to farm, and say, if I apply these, then I've got a good farming system. Instead of saying, I'm doing Joel Salatin, I'm doing Alan Savory. Because they're being moved out of a time and place to another time and place, which so often goes wrong, which is what development does. When we cut down the Amazon to grow cattle in yards, we have actually taken one ecosystem and tried to put it in another, which is highly destructive. So being able to say, what are the principles of a food forest? What are the principles, the animal and the plants and the structures and the water and how we design it? What are the principles of a good regenerative agriculture system? Then you can do it anywhere if you've got the principles in your head. So we're looking at that. We're looking at, with global warming, we can no longer think about windbreaks. We have to think of a wider range of forests. So we contour forests, shelter belts, whole range of things that are going to give us more trees in the ground and greater stability. And we're going to look at coastal forests and river forests and really start to think how these could go back. You could do a permaculture design for Australia. You do the whole coast, you do all the rivers, they're in vegetation that will never ever be touched. You build those great buffer banks for wind or for movement of soils. Then you take out steep slopes and you put those under permanent vegetation. Then you start removing those other areas that are specialised. You're left with some that will give you good yields for years, especially if we're using perennial species together with some sort of animal. So you learn to think in ways that are from principle, from pattern to detail. That's sort of the environmental stuff, and knowing when the ecosystem's broken and how to restore it. Looking for activity in a garden in Portugal, there wasn't any. So you should be able to sit in a place and look along the light and you'll see moths, lizards, wasps, everything. And it should look like an insect zoo, and if it's not, the ecosystem's not very good because you haven't got that insect zoo there working, doing what it should be doing to make sure the next crop is pollinated, the pests are managed, that sort of thing. So we are looking at those sort of indicators in our initial observation to talk about healthy systems, healthy ecosystems. And then when we get to social permaculture, we're talking about the things which enable humans and other species to survive and thrive. We're not talking about zone 0-0. So zone 0-0 is whether I feel like doing it or not. I don't know if I'm meant to do that. Or I have a feeling I ought to clean water, but I'm not sure. It's about accepting perhaps a certain responsibility and then creating the conditions under which we can all live and live well. Access to land, right to land, adequate housing, banking systems that work for the people, not for the banks, companies that give you a voice, companies in which you've got some degree of equity. We're looking at systems that work for people and all animals. We're not interested. That is social permaculture. We're looking at education that's relevant. And people, I think personal permaculture is how I practice my ethics. What's that noise?
It's the waste truck.
Oh,
He's pumping the septic.
Oh. Okay. Anyway, so you know, yeah, I'm really not very happy about personal permaculture because it is too centred on I. And here I'm just going to tell you something about, I personally believe we're happiest when we're engaged in something we really enjoy and like, and very often in the service of others or the planet in some way. I think there's a real sense of, this is good, this is what we need to be doing, this feels marvellous, let's get on with it. So every time I sit and think about me, either I'm no good or I'm hopeless or I wish I'd done that and I should have done this and what am I meant to do with my life? Oh my God, I don't know what to do with my life. I've probably got a year left, but you know, this sort of agonising, I think every time we get involved in something fabulous, whatever takes us, we are happy and fulfilled, and especially when we're working well with others. So we need to improve our way we work with others, our financial systems, our land systems, our working systems, and that's where social permaculture comes in for the social good. And again, how do I work in my community? So I just finished, I think you know, I just finished a book, and there are 10 or 11 new chapters dealing much more with ethical money and dealing more about healthy ecosystems and understanding them, dealing more with patterns in nature and what we need to be able to do. I don't mind whether you buy the book or not. Tell your library to get it and borrow it. I'm not interested particularly in the sales, but I think perhaps it will have a role trying to write for the next decade or so of permaculture that is important. Now, what I'd like you to... I think it's the end of the world myself. It's coming. Can you hear it? It's got... looks like this. Okay. It's that one. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that it's got a teal cover? That wasn't designed.
It's a nice size, I like it.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a good doorstop. It's 1.5 kilograms. It keeps doors open in big winds. Beg pardon?
It will be for sale at the end of the week.
So what I'd like you to do is talk about, with a little group of 3 or 4 people, now discuss what topics in your PDC you felt you got a good grasp of and you learnt well, and which you thought could have been stronger and better, and how you feel about the PDC as you did it now. So this is a little bit of an assessment of that for the next few minutes, please. Bit of a chat time. Over to you. Your PDC. Every now and again there's room for a lecture, and I choose my time or I flip over and make it active.
We just need a couple of minutes to role play debriefing.
Oh yeah, okay.
So maybe if you give me in 10, I could introduce microteaching, role play debriefing, and then we can wrap up with a whoosh or something at the end.
Yeah, we'll do the whoosh to finish, just it's a good first day. Okay, so in the minute I'm going to ask people to come and write on the board, as soon as they write, some of the topics that were...
And
you know what I realised? It's so good to do this now because we've got on the PDC the first day.
Yeah.
And we have, if we left it till tomorrow, they might feel their... Right, as soon as you're ready, would you just put a couple of topics up there? Just go and write up. Yep, thanks. And we'll get someone else up. Just from your group. Yep, okay. When you're ready, will you just put the couple of topics up there? Not a lot, just the key ones that stand out for you. Okay, good. When you're ready, will you just put key topics up? Well taught, or could have been better, or could be better. Up on the board. You've probably got 2 more minutes. You a group of 2? Okay. Will you just put a couple of topics up there that you feel that you roughly agree on?
Margaret personally likes to think about intricate detail. That on
Oh, there's an orange.
space on the ground stuff.
Can I just interrupt you? Would you mind just putting a couple of topics up that you've discussed as things you thought were really well taught and you've got a good grasp, or things that could have been better? You've got 2 more minutes and we're going to have a look at that list. Right. I'm just seeing what you're seeing.
I'm just trying to listen to
Sarah
Faye. My ear's closer.
Yeah. In a minute, would you just put topics you thought were well taught or could have been better? Just grab a pen. What you're talking about as a group.
Should we say well taught would be...
Off you go. Grab the pen. Yeah. Grab the... Well, there you are. That's not mine.
Would you like a cushion row?
No, thanks. I'm fine there. Yeah, I'm quite comfortable there. Right. Okay. You sort of agreed with topics you'd like to put up there? You can go and write while others are writing. Oh, just a couple. Just a couple that stood out for you. Yeah, off you go. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah. And how many topics are there for them to choose from when they choose a PDC?
Well, I don't know. I've got about 40.
You've got 40.
Yeah. But you're just choosing a couple. Right. Would you put your topics up, please? Now, will you please check people at the other end of the room can read your writing? This is a lesson in writing big enough. Right, off you go. Have you written yours yet? Will you just make sure you write big enough so that you can read your own from there? Okay, this is an exercise in writing big on the board. Right. You know, you can actually give a lecture after lunch and people won't go to sleep if they're ready for it. Otherwise, I would have changed my method immediately. If there was sufficient interest in it and it's relevant to what they want, I want them to take note if they're writing big enough.
Yeah, I do think we can ask other people on this side of the room if the glare is a problem. But for me,
we won't ask too much.
Well, it was a problem.
Okay, well then we'll move the board slightly that way or something.
It's just
we'll
when
just
people
correct
are
it.
there, maybe we don't need to do anything about it.
Okay. That's good. That's really good. Make sure people can read at the other side of the room. Have your group been up yet? Okay, we're getting people to write big enough to be able to read the other side of the room. That's good. Righto. Good. There we are. All different teachers, so you'll get different things. But this is just this is just consciousness, really. And you know, in your teaching, you either want people to learn or to become aware. And at this stage, it's awareness. Yes, if a topic's absolutely new, awareness is enough. You wouldn't expect people to learn all the principles first day in one session, but they're aware, they've heard them, they recognise them when they come up again.
It's a lifelong learning, really, isn't it?
It is. And permaculture's lifelong interesting too. You know, you get so interested suddenly in the kitchen garden, and then you find yourself in a refugee camp with no land. And you have to think, how can a kitchen garden be applied here when there's no land and no resource? You know, what can we do? And then you're forced to see if it'll work. So someone there's been up, that's up, that's up, that's up. That's good. Nice size writing.
So I would like to write practical because that's a lot of things what I understand with the PDC. It's not practical based.
It is absolutely practical for design.
Yes.
But it's not practical for making a garden. It's not implementation.
That's right.
So it is practical design.
That's ours, and I feel like that really armed us to go home with everything we needed knowledge-wise to go and
But you won't know how to do some of it. That's the next step that isn't done in permaculture. Oh, good. You've achieved your goal when they're all talking, but then they never stop.
I know.
On and on and on. But for me, this is a healthy classroom now, with the level of noise of engagement and argument and discussion, and they're all sharing a common ground of permaculture, so the knowledge is even. Yeah. Good. That's it. Okay, we'll finish in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Here we go. Strength in number. It's a great t-shirt, isn't it? Very, very good. This time we'll do hands up for quiet. Thank you, everyone. I think you've done that extremely well. Will you have a look at your writing? Do you think people can see it the other side of the room? Because it was also a board exercise, so that was tricky, wasn't it? Maybe not fair. Actually, there's not a lot there about actual topics where you feel that absolutely confident about the topics. There are some, but what you're going to be doing this week is strengthen your knowledge of topics and ability to teach them, going through, you know, must know, should know, could know. In permaculture, there hasn't been much that's absolutely new added to the course, except for care of oceans, because the last 5 years had been a world sweep of knowledge and understanding that the oceans are so much more important than was understood even a decade ago. And we have to take that on board seriously and say, what, from this design here, even 3,000 kilometres inland perhaps, what's going to be the impact on the ocean? And that is a question for a teacher all the time, because everything ends up in the sea. And every bit of ocean pollution starts on the land somewhere. So we now have a whole way of zoning coasts, of looking at ports and port cities and how to understand them. Other than that, it's the same old permaculture applied to oceans, with strategies and techniques for different coastal landscapes. The thing that we are missing is one topic that stands out for me. Can any of you think of a topic that should be in permaculture and isn't?
Well, I mean, like, it is in permaculture, but it wasn't in the PDC that I took because the guy that was going to take it couldn't come, but it was zone 0, 0.
Well, we don't do that because that's self. And all we say is, how well do you function in your society? That's all we ask of you, because otherwise someone wants Buddhism and someone wants meditation and someone wants cosmic awareness and someone wants... What we want is zone 0, 0 is personal, permaculture. Whereas social permaculture is us and how we can all thrive in that environment. So zone 0, 0 actually I think came out of Europe, and it's all about what I feel I should be doing and what I feel I want to do and what I feel I don't want to do. And there is actually no curriculum for that. It's very strong in parts of France, by the way. I could tell you about that later. That's your personal... That is a question that you have to take on, yes. So some courses...
I don't have a perspective on it at all, because I wasn't engaged with that
okay.
course, but I couldn't tell if that was like... I could tell it was a contentious one, whether it's engaged. You know?
Okay, so that's something you might need to be aware of and have an understanding, talk with your classes. And similarly, air quality and sand removal are two huge global challenges. And we're realising now that the global challenges we started with are also the same as the planetary boundaries that UN gives us. There's almost total correspondence. In 1971, those planetary boundaries are almost the same as world problems that were listed first up in the course to get the problems out of the way, and today they're the planetary boundaries. Once they're broken, systems start to break down. So that's something that's changed for us. So we've added to knowledge, but not in ways that are extraordinary or amazing or particularly, miraculous in any way. And the other thing is, we haven't been able to take anything out, really. It is still all relevant, but the evidence is so much greater for practicing permaculture, and perhaps we have better means and tools to do it. So it's sharpened its focus, but I don't think it's changed. There isn't much room to put in very much more.
It doesn't do a very good job of critical thinking though, does it? It doesn't ever interrogate its own assumptions. In a PDC, you very rarely interrogate the assumptions that have been made about what you've been taught.
Yeah, I think you have to interrogate it, but the other thing is whether it is still valuable over time and space. And I think that's where the interrogation tells us whether we're on track or not. We'll also have a look at that. So we've, since Bill and David started, we've got all sorts of things happening with ethics and principles as well. Not ethics, but principles. Okay.
I might have just missed what you said, but you said one more topic that should be taught that isn't.
Yes, that's right. Anyone? Any idea? I think air quality is important. I've put it in, but it's one of the wicked problems. Another wicked problem is ocean rise. Another wicked problem is pack ice melt. Right, glaciers melt. 12,000 glaciers across the Himalaya fringe. When they melt, it's bad news, and we don't have... I wish Bill were here, because Bill would have a way into thinking about that, and I haven't. I think the I haven't forgotten. And I think the topic that we must consider urgently, especially living here in this part of the world, is we need to develop a curriculum and syllabus for island, ISLAND, island permaculture, whether it's volcanic or whether it's coral cay and lagoon permaculture. Without that, the million people who live on islands of the world, we have nothing to offer them as a way of thinking at the moment. You're going to say?
That was it. I was going to ask whether your final one was displacement. It's kind of answered it. Yeah.
I'm interested in air quality management in relation to Australia's and other countries' burning practices with their logging or forest management.
So there we are. That's something that will come up later on if you want to. But yes, you're absolutely right. The burning of trash, if you fly over South America and South Africa, it all burns at the end of summer, the whole stubble everywhere. But on the other hand, in a town like Kabul, people burn plastic to keep warm. All the people who don't have homes in winter burn plastic bags. So, you know, there are a whole series of issues apart from just industrial smoke that need addressing. But we have to think about them, we have to try. Okay. Well, I think Brenna's got something really interesting for you now, haven't you, Brenna?
I do.
Something different and wonderful.
Pretty exciting.
Yep.
So I invite everybody to please put your left hand over your heart, your right hand in the air, and repeat after me. I like microteaching.
I like microteaching.
Microteaching helps me to do permaculture. Microteaching is my way to make the world a better place. Microteaching is awesome. Oh, it's so enthusiastic. That's lovely.
So what's microteaching?
It's been all lies, Nick. Yeah, no cult in permaculture. Microteaching is an activity that we will do every day from tomorrow until the end of the course. It's our opportunity to really put what we're learning in this course into practice in what is a safe and supportive environment. So, in essence, it's us teaching for a short amount of time with a small amount of other people in groups on topics of your choosing. And I would encourage you to take from the micro-teaching experience what you want to get out of it. So if you're a very experienced teacher, push yourself out of your comfort zone. If you're a newbie teacher, try something new that you'll be proud of. This is really your opportunity in this week to practice your teaching, and no one's marking you right or wrong. No one's going to laugh at you unless you make a funny joke. Nobody's judging you. We're all here supporting each other. We're all here having the same experience and in this together. So it's a great and unique opportunity for us. Tomorrow, in the session after lunch, we'll be doing micro-teaching. So we'll be in groups of about 5 people. You'll each have a chance to teach. And for tomorrow's one, you'll be teaching for 10 minutes each. This evening, or tomorrow morning, you'll select a core topic from the PDC. So, there are some topics in the PDC that will appear in pretty much every PDC. Zone 00 we heard named before, that's one that appears sometimes in some PDCs, but it's not what we'd call a core topic. What are some examples of core topics? Water. Soil. Zones. Wild energy sectors. Forests. Ethics. Patterns, principles. Excellent. So we have books here that have core topics in them. Ro's written one of those books. We also have a few, and I'll leave them right here, or maybe even on the fireplace, a few examples of timetables, syllabus from other PDCs. that if you're new to permaculture, if you haven't done a PDC, for example, or you did one and it was a while ago, you can refresh what core topics are by cross-referencing those, and also using the knowledge of the group here. So we're choosing a core topic, teaching for 10 minutes. So you'll be teaching a portion of that core topic. You won't be able to summarise an hour and a half topic in 10 minutes. You'll teach a useful portion, keeping in mind that that useful 10 minutes, we'd like it to contain sort of an allusion to what the topic is about. So if you're teaching principles and you're focusing in on one or two principles, really naming principles as a topic too, because the learning in this is thinking about those core topics and being able to practice our teaching skills. Tomorrow afternoon, and we'll run through this as a refresher right before we get into micro-teaching, you'll arrange your teaching space with your group. So that means groups can go off where you'd like to. If you need a whiteboard, we'll have spare small portable ones up the back. If you need paper and pens or whatever, you know, have a think about what that teaching space is going to look like for you. And you'll decide in your group the order of who teaches first, second, third, fourth, fifth, based on when that would occur in a PDC. So we're thinking patterns to details. These are all techniques that we're using to help you familiarise yourself with what actually takes place in a PDC to avoid that drift off what a core PDC is that Ro mentioned before. Any questions about tomorrow's micro-teaching? I'm going to stick these up on the wall. Yep, Sarah?
Is this just for us to do in our own time this evening?
It is.
Are we in the same groups that we've already established?
Be in different groups. Yep.
Once we've got the groups, then we each decide what we're going to teach?
Yep. Okay. Yep, you'll have a quick couple, we'll get in groups with an activity and you'll have a couple of minutes to say, all right, you're probably first, second, third. If two people have the same topic, that's fine. Just see who wants to go first or second. Jasper?
The topic that you pick, will that be the one that you will stay with throughout the duration?
We'd encourage you to use a different topic every time so that you're really making the most of this experience. Great question, thank you.
The micro-teachings are getting longer as we go through, so...
Slightly.
So if you wanted to really explore a topic, you're probably best to keep that to the end. Like if you want to make a bigger... The first one's 10 minutes, but say you wanted to do a much bigger...
The next two are 15.
Yep.
And then the last two are with more people than just you. So keeping that in mind. Other questions?
If people wanted to make learning tools and materials, are those resources at the back?
Totally.
For everyone to use?
Everything in all of Fair Harvest within reason is available for you. But yes, the paper and the pens and all that stuff, that's what that's there for. You can make your own posters if you want. Probably don't use 100 sheets of the A1 paper because there'll be none left, but use what you need to. And there will be enough whiteboards for one per group, including this one. There's another one in the barn. Thanks for everyone that brought a whiteboard. Wasn't that impressive? If you're feeling nervous about micro-teaching, that is totally normal, very normal, especially in this course. It is a normal experience. If we're feeling comfortable, we're probably not being courageous. It's hard to have courage and comfort at the same time. So embracing discomfort as part of our learning journey is what we encourage in this course. You can't pass on micro-teaching, but you can say, hey, I'm feeling nervous, let me take 5, take a few breaths, and your group will support you. Remember, it's small groups, so this is a really gentle experience. Any other questions on micro-teaching? Oh, I'm holding this one up and I'm just about to explain it.
Can I just add one thing? Maybe it's a bit corny, but I like thinking about the edge effect and the learning edge. And when we feel that discomfort, we're on that learning edge, and that in ecology is often the most diverse place where the abundance is where things are growing fast and there's diversity. And when we can remember that in ecology and then remember that in ourselves, maybe we can step and embrace that discomfort.
Not a lot happens in comfort zones.
No, unfortunately. Wouldn't it be lovely if it did? I could be at home right now.
I think I
learning perspective from the team that I'm working with to then see if I've got that. Is that what we're testing?
So we focus more on that detail further on. Right. If you're feeling comfortable at that level, yes, go for it. And we'll specifically name something to that effect in the next couple of days. We're seeing this as the first try. So we're teaching for 10 minutes. For some people, that's enough. Get out of it what you're looking to get out of it. Shani?
I'm just, am I right in saying you're probably going to want to think of the 10 minutes in, help me with the word. So I'm going to say, okay, this is the first half an hour of a 10-week, five-hour lecture, or this is happening at the beginning of that, we've heard a lecture from this person, then we're having this little debrief activity, and that's what I'm teaching.
Yep.
So,
you're very welcome to contextualise it.
thank you.
Just got back from lunch, what a great session on patterns, and now we're diving into whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the beginning of it though, isn't it, for 10 minutes?
It can be any part of it.
Any part of it.
Yeah.
Dive into any part of the whole topic. Yeah.
Anything else to add on that row?
Well, you appoint your own timekeeper and debriefing person in the group. I'll just say, okay, you know, will you be my debriefer? Will you be my timekeeper? Give me a call after 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you want, or none at all if you don't need a timekeeper. But it's really up to you. But you do appoint your own and try to make sure everyone has a go at each of those roles, that they have an opportunity to keep time and opportunity to debrief, not one person sits on those roles all the way through.
Oh, debriefing, that sounds like jargon, row.
Yeah, that's a jargon word.
Let's explain what debriefing means.
Seeing a lot of drawings and
Or they're briefs. Just to help. Did you just teach or did I?
Whatever you like.
You just taught.
What, I'm going to debrief you?
I'll debrief you.
All right. Well, I've just taught patterns in nature.
Oh, cool. So I'm your debriefer. How was your day, Ro?
Oh, it's just rotten.
Yeah?
I did a lousy job. I feel terrible.
What'd you have for breakfast?
Oh, breakfast?
Yeah.
What's that got to do?
Oh, just debriefing, you know. Doing a good job at it.
I'm worried about what I taught the students.
Oh, okay. If you want to go with that, yeah. Okay. What was hard about it? What was the hardest part?
Well, some of them left.
Oh.
They walked out, and I felt terrible.
What was the best part?
Some stayed and got interested, and they got really interested in the topic, and they did these great drawings and maps of water that I couldn't imagine they would have done.
What would you do differently next time?
I'd make it more interesting earlier. Yeah, I'd make it. I was going to say that, and I thought I'm not going to ham it up too much. Yeah, I'd make it more interesting earlier and engage them earlier, because once that happened, they were really great. Yeah, but half did leave.
Thanks, Ro.
Okay. Do you want to go?
Sure, yeah.
What did you teach?
I just taught, what did you teach? Patterns?
Yeah.
I just taught alternative economics.
So you were teaching alternative economics?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the hardest part of that, Brenna?
Oh, it was that I hadn't learned any content and I came totally unprepared. Basically just woke up and turned up, chose the topic right then and there, and yeah, didn't know what to say.
So what was the best part?
That while thinking on my feet, I thought up a great activity and people just had the knowledge there and ended up saving the day. We had a really interesting group discussion.
And what would you do differently next time you teach that?
I'll probably think a little bit, at least, about what I'm going to teach. Maybe read a chapter in a book or something, I don't know, watch a bit of YouTube. Yeah, be prepared, write a couple dot points down. Yeah, I think that, I don't know, I've just got this sneaking suspicion that might make a difference.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Thanks. What did people notice?
Too much feedback. Like you just asking questions and she was self-diving and making analysis herself about how what went well, what didn't, what she could do better. You weren't giving her that advice, like you were terrible, you didn't do this.
Building up, not putting down.
Yeah,
It's no judgment.
yeah, self-judgment.
You just asking questions.
Yeah, and didn't respond, didn't console, didn't say everyone probably liked it or I thought it was great, kept absolutely silent, and the whole thing was just letting the person say what they need to say and want to say, and as long as they need to do it. But it's not about then taking the attention back to me while I say, I think you did really well, see, it's back on me. Or I thought it was great, really, and no consolation, it's just what happened. Yeah, all right, thanks. We'll debrief later with the teachers, huh?
We do this in real life every day.
Yeah, we do it at the end of the day. Okay, thanks. Mm-hmm.
This poster is going to go up on the wall, and I'd encourage everyone to take a picture or some notes for tomorrow, because the wording is actually quite important. We don't say what's the most difficult part, what was the worst thing. We don't phrase the question in 3 paragraphs. These are the words that we use because they're effective and they bring out the desired response, which is that self-reflection. It creates space for that self-reflection. Rowan.
I can't read them.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, we can just end the topic. You can have a look at them after. We'll leave it up there. That is me not doing a great job at writing posters, and it's the same set that I had the same feedback.
Just only because it's in the context of now. Can you just read them?
Debriefing. What was the hardest part? What was the best part? What would you do differently next time? Write a larger poster. So you choose one person to be your debriefer, and we'll go through the timekeeper, debriefer, and also teachers in your groups tomorrow. Anything else to add, Ro?
I think that's pretty much it. That's all you need to do, yeah.
End of day close.
End of day close. Perhaps just a quick, how do people feel about being in this class at the end of their first big day? And tomorrow's bigger. So just take a minute. How do you feel about being part of this class now, after today, as we come to the end of it? We can start anywhere.
Depends on the subject or kind of depth they are.
Say that again?
Depends, like if we're going for an evening session, if the subjects are quite in depth and intense, then it might be a bit much. Other than that, I think that's my personal opinion.
Feeling better. Head's hot, too many thoughts. Bit in a good way.
I'm feeling overwhelmed already.
Are we going in order or just ready?
Yeah.
Well, if we just whip around, we'll finish and then go in.
Super.
Yeah, still taking rolling.
It's hot, yeah. And more air.
I'm going to say the word hope.
Oh, sorry. I feel happy to be here, but a little tired and daunted by the focus that is going to be required ongoing.
I feel really good. I think the way that the sessions are being done, the way PowerPoints and staring at, and
not hurting my head. Normally I have a headache by the end of the day after these, but I feel really good and excited about opportunities we're going to have to learn and grow.
Yeah, I'm finding bits of it intense, but the presentation's been good in that I've stayed engaged, which is pretty unusual for a day of head stuff.
I've really enjoyed it so far. I'm enjoying the newness of it. I'm feeling a little bit nervous and excited about doing microteaching.
I'm feeling optimistic. I think there's a lot to learn. It's probably a lifelong learning thing rather than just completed in a week. But yeah, I feel optimistic that I'm going to learn a lot.
I feel energised.
I feel good about this class.
It's a bit overwhelming.
Excited for the opportunities, disappointed that I can't sit in on everyone's microcircles.
Disappointed that what?
Can't sit on everyone's microcircles.
Watch the film.
Actually, got to fill the wall.
Excited, expansive, a little bit stressed. Good though.
I'm loving the community spirit, like we're on day 2 and feeling really good. Nervous. Every time you teach, you get nervous, so I'm passionate about what I'm teaching.
A lot of information, but it's inspiring to see how the actual course is structured to be able to transfer that into our own teaching.
I'm feeling excited for the micro-teaching tomorrow. It's always great to learn from other teachers, and I am trusting in the length of time we've spent building a learning community today, that we can hold a safe place for people tomorrow who are feeling overwhelmed.
I'm hungry. And so, yeah, a little bit overpeopled actually. The amount of people in this room is just a bit, yeah.
I feel strangely relaxed and just trying to take each session a session at a time, rather than getting myself lost in the whole day of what's to come. So I am trying and I feel succeeding in just being very in the moment for each thing.
I'm feeling anxious and underprepared.
Yes, but also like Greta said, like there has been such stability in reading that I would normally feel like throwing up at the idea of presenting a topic on something I don't know much about, but I feel like it's going to be okay. Like it's going to be a safe container. I don't know what my comments.
I'm feeling excited about some of the conversations I've had with people today and last night, and some of the ones that I know are coming up in the next week.
I'm loving getting to know everybody, trying to work through the name list and feeling good with that at the minute, I think, but that was great. Everything was really cool until about half an hour ago, and I went, oh my god, it's real. I'm going to have to do some actual micro-teaching. Fuck. Bring it on. Courage. I might vomit.
I think I'm pretty much the same. I was feeling all inspired and calm and everything was great, and then now my head's just going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, and it's just going round and round, and that's it.
Teaching moment, to finish the day with people just saying one word or a couple of words about how they feel. There are lots of ways to do it, and we'll try different ways, but it's quite important to finish the day. If people have just said, I'm feeling like this, or I'm feeling like this, or I'm feeling like that, it is still relieves them somewhat of taking away from that various forms of anxieties and things. So although it's an evaluation, it's also a sense of I've been able to say or do something about my day. So it could be I feel rotten, or I feel medium, I feel brilliant. Lots of ways of doing it. We'll do several of them. But one is just to ask people, and they finish the day happier. So that's just something you can do in your teaching instead of just saying, we'll just go outside or do an activity. Okay.
Don't we have another session as well?
Oh, yes, but this is sort of end of the day stuff. This evening's just fun, we think.
So we do have a break between now and 6 o'clock. Dinner will be served at about 6. And then from 7 to 8, there's an optional session on ethics, principles, strategies and techniques, how they're taught, history, row, having a chat, all that sort of stuff. So that'll happen after dinner. And for those whose group is on Morning Circle, you can come see me in a second if you've got questions about that, and we'll just set you on the right path. Question, Pat?
Afternoon, evening session here or the barn?
Here or the barn, Ro?
Let's go to the barn.
Okay, let's do it.
Are you going to tell us our groups now, or we'll find out in the morning?
Find out tomorrow. Yep. So
I just thought if I go to my group and we've all done the same topic, there's a learning thing that might be good to have to know.
doesn't matter, seldom happens. You will prepare your micro-teaching in the gaps that are left, end of today, tomorrow morning, lunchtime. It's 10 minutes. It's just keep saying that to you, it's 10 minutes.
Just to clarify, I don't know if this question's already been asked, but we're supposed to be preparing a fairly complete lesson for 10 minutes, or can we kind of imagine that we're just taking a little 10-minute chunk?
Just a little 10-minute chunk. Remembering that we're, I was going to say, remembering, you know, are our learners empty cups or are they rich soups? Because our learners are our greatest resource as an educator. So how can we make them do all of the work in those 10 minutes? And we can channel Jeff's energy meditating in the corner.
It doesn't have to be you standing there talking. You might set an activity and they might do the activity, which may mean that you don't need to know.
Shani's onto it there. Any other questions about micro-teaching before we close?
Do you want this circle kept as a circle when we clean this room
Oh,
tonight?
fantastic question. Thank you. And thanks, Greta, for being onto it. So the team that's on cleaning up, there's tables just out that door. And if everyone can hear this, when you walk in that door and turn left, like if you say you walked in that door and went like this, your hand would be around where the tablecloths are kept, and they are optional, but if you're on setup, you're welcome to put those out on the tables. But the tables we've been stacking and putting there, you can bring them in. If it's nice, we can eat outside, out there. It's up to you as a group how we...
Who's doing that setup or the setup?
Sorry, I meant clean.
We're having meals. That's meals people want at the table?
I'd imagine so, yeah.
I meant you want this floor swept?
No, it's fine today. Yep.
So you want this kept the way it is?
Yeah.
Can I just ask one question?
One more question, then we're going to close.
Does anyone have a Samsung phone charger that I can borrow for just like 30 minutes?
Yes. It's plugged in the outdoor kitchen already. There's a little quadrant talk thing. It's a short one.
Alrighty, so everybody up. It's been a big day. Congratulations on getting this far. And we're going to close it with a permaculture tradition called the whoosh. So we're feeling the energy in our hands, and how it works is we're going to all move towards the center, and as we do it, we're going to go whoosh, and we'll let the energy out, okay? So let's do it together. Feeling that energy, feeling that energy. It's been a big day, great group. All right, starting low. Good job, everyone. We'll see you at 6 for dinner.